So, good evening, friends. In the series of our Neuro-Otology and Epigenetic Society of India's web series, we have started. The next speaker is Dr. Prahlad NB. I don't think he requires an introduction. He is a man who does everything, I would rather say. He is in social work, he is in health, he is in the advisory board to the cabinet secretariat there in Delhi with the PM advisory fund. He is a motivational educationist, a public speaker, and a terrific operator, a terrific surgeon, a knowledgeable surgeon, a good educationalist. Three people I can quote here in India, like Dr. Satish Jain, Dr. Janaki, and then Dr. Prahlad, who are, I think, the most hardworking ENT guy there in India. He starts his day at 4 a.m. and he ends by 11. And he is always working in the field of maybe research or something like that. He has got his own center where he is a professor and director with Chitrudurga's uh, Karnataka ENT Hospital and Research Center, associated with one of the medical colleges down there. And he has been very humble to start with NES webinars at his platform. And with us, we do have three renowned ENT surgeons who are doing a good work in the field of ENT, specifically in the field of neurotology. Dr. Srinivas Dorsala, you have heard him for last 4 webinars. He is a Vertigo man himself. Then we do have Dr. Rajiv Kapila, director of the Deep Hospitals there in Ludhiana. He is a postgraduate from SMS Jaipur, and he did his SRship from SDPGI Lucknow. He is director of Deep Hospital ENT division. He does everything. He also does everything. Dr. Shashank Nath Singh, who is associate professor with SMS Medical College Jaipur, more into CI and more into neurotology. So I would request Dr. Prahlad to start with his lecture.
Yeah, good evening.
Request people to please don't write down any pleasantries, hellos, and good and all compliments and all on the chat box, because it keeps on popping there on the screen. It disturbs the speaker as well as the people who are discussing your queries. So just put in queries only, or you can just direct it to me on my WhatsApp number. I'm writing down in the chat box. You can directly ask me so that I can present these questions. So this is my number I have put in. Okay, Dr. Pawan Singhal. You can start with your lecture, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Pawan. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I really don't know I deserve that. Anyway, I'm grateful. Okay, I again thank the NES for this wonderful opportunity for so many people. For me, first of all, for me to share my knowledge today, and also so many people interested in learning about vertigo and join this program. I think this is one of the greatest initiatives that have happened. I saw during last 4 classes, there were more than 400 people joining the classes from all over the world. So for example, last meeting, we had something like 39 countries. I saw 39 different countries, including UK, USA, Australia, and so many countries. This particularly NES webinar has become a very popular platform. I wish it grows even more bigger. With this, I'll come to my presentation. Whatever I'm going to say today, it has already been said. What I'm going to tell you today has already been told. What I'm going to describe to you has already been described. Of all the speakers who have delivered in the last 4 classes, starting from Dr. Srinivas with his wonderful introduction, and later by Dr. Kshitij, Dr. Avinash. Dr. Avinash, upon my request, he took 2 classes on history as well as examination. I think this is kind of summarizing. More than summarizing, I want this to be a kind of quiz for you. Okay, this is going to be a quiz. At every step, you can, this thing, you can So, Dr. Pawan requested not to post anything in the chat. You can post upon his, his number. You can WhatsApp to him directly your answers. Okay, we will see whoever gets maximum answers. We can kind of, a special certificate can be given from the NES. NES planning to give certificates to the participants who have participated in all the programs in this webinar series. That's a great gesture from them. Okay, I hope they will also give a special certificate for the people who answer maximum number of questions in this. Okay, yeah. With this, okay, this is a special kind of presentation I prepared some time back. I am not a very focused man. I don't stick to one thing. I keep on experimenting. I keep on trying something new kind of presentations, okay, new kind of platforms to make my presentation, more attractive and interesting. But I realized that I had prepared this presentation sometime back for NES oration. I realized this is not quite good for Zoom, but I didn't have time to convert this into a PowerPoint or other kind of presentation. So you may not have smooth movement of this presentation. Kindly tolerate with me. So anyway, I'm going to run it slowly that so that you enjoy it. Okay, coming to the vertigo. Vertigo is the most common ENT problem for which a patient come to an ENT surgeon. But vertigo is also considered one of the most difficult problem to diagnose as well as treat. But friends, so believe me, if you really give time to the patients, listen to them, take the history properly, and examine them systematically based on their complaint, and do the investigations which are appropriate for his problem, you can definitely diagnose most of the patients. And once you diagnose, now we already have a set protocol for appropriate treatment for this patient. We can definitely treat these patients, and this is what has been my experience so far. I'm going to share that experience to you. Okay, see, sometime back I presented this presentation at NES conference that was in 2019 for Professor PP Karnik's oration. That was a wonderful opportunity given to me by NES, okay, which was organized under the leadership of again Dr. Pawan Singhal ji, and this was organized at Bangalore by none other than Dr. Srinivas Doresala, now who has become an icon of vertigo in India. See, I would like to give credit for two people as far as vertigo development of vertigo science considered in India. One is, I think we should give a lot of credit to Dr. Anirban Biswas from Calcutta, who did a lot of work. He even wrote a book on audiovestibular science, and he really conducted the programs almost every year, a special program at Calcutta. I couldn't attend that program, but I did listen to one or two his lectures here and there. But I am, but everybody believes that, or everybody knows that he is one of the person who really worked to develop this vertigo science in India. And now it has changed. Now a new order has come, okay, and a new blood has come. The young generation really changing from taking this vertigo to the next level. And you can see the band of young and entrepreneurial ENT surgeons who will be speaking in this event. We already have had 3 people, and we have again long list of speakers who are going to speak next, and they are changing the science of vertigo in India, bringing the new perspective, new understanding into it. And I will give special credit to Dr. Srinivas, because he not only studied vertigo very much, he came out with his own solution, made in India solution is a Cyclops. Okay, that is something outstanding. So I would call this as vertigo as a new two generations. One is Dr. Anirban Biswas generation, other one is Dr. Srinivas generation. Okay, and this particular lecture was delivered at NES 2019 in the memory of Professor PP Karnik, PP Karnik's oration. I'm presenting the same thing to you, and I would like to state that I have no financial conflict of interest as much as my presentation concerned. So why I keep this diagnosing peripheral vertigo in periphery? Friends, I practice somewhere in peripheral remote place called Chitradurga, which is about 200 kilometers away from Bangalore, and two major cities are 200 kilometers away. One is Hubli in the other side, Bangalore is the other side. I'm in the center part, and I had no access to any higher end gadget when I started my practice way back in 2000. So all that I had was my time, my knowledge, and my skills. I could spend only more time with patient to take their history and examine them appropriately. Based on that, I could treat. I couldn't even afford to get some higher end gadget, investigations. So for these patients, even if I wanted to get an a CT scan, I had to send them to Bangalore until a new CT scan machine came to our medical college. Yeah. So based on that, my experience, last 20 years of experience, I developed my own algorithm to treat the diagnose and treat this patient. That I call that Kent algorithm. Okay. Yeah. With this, we'll jump to the diagnosis of peripheral vertigo in peripheries. Okay. See, we being ENT surgeons, our main focus is peripheral vertigo. That is vestibular vertigo. Okay. That we should be concerned with. The moment we realize that this is not a peripheral vertigo, then we should involve other specialty, mainly neurologists and neurosurgeons into the picture. So when we are dealing with peripheral vertigo, we have one of the biggest challenge in front of us first to find out site of the lesion. Okay, we have to find out site of the lesion. So where is the site of the lesion? We have to find out whether it's a, first of all, is it a otological problem, okay, or a CNS problem, or it is a non-neuro-otological problem. I've kept this non-neuro-otological problem as a separate group, mainly because, see, in my practice, I have noticed one of the common, etiology for vertigo-like symptom is anemia. Many of these, ladies, we multipara, not eating adequately, coming from poor background, and have anemia, they present with such complaint. That's why I keep this another as a systemic or non-neuro-otological this thing, site of lesion. Okay, that we should keep in mind. From that site of lesion, once we know that this is a otological condition, peripheral vertigo, then we have an onus of finding out whether it is a right side lesion or left side lesion. So many a times this may evade our attention, evade our examination, the history skills, but we really have to put a lot of efforts and find out where exactly is the side of the lesion. Okay, and and once we know that we will say which side is the lesion, then we have to find out problem whether it is within the vestibule or it is in the eighth now vestibular cochlear nerve, specifically vestibular nerve. Okay, and vestibular nerve means it is not only the vestibular nerve, could be behind also, it may be vestibular nucleus also. I mean, when I say vestibular nerve, I also mean to say vestibular nucleus also. So we need to find out one of where exactly is the lesion. Okay, from there, once we know the lesion, then we need to remember when we evaluate the patient, when we take the history, we need to remember one unique definition, which clearly points out to the peripheral vertigo. What is the definition? That is patient presenting with either subjective or objective sensation of vertigo, which is rotary in nature. I'm going to tell you once again, what is peripheral vertigo? Definition of peripheral vertigo is patient presenting with either subjective or objective sensation of vertigo, which is rotary in nature. That is what is more important. Okay. So once we know that patient fulfills all these three criteria, then we know that this is a peripheral vertigo. From there, we jump to next. From one definition, we are going to move to the two important history. Once we know that we are dealing with peripheral vertigo, what are those two important history we need to elicit from the patient? That is, one is history related to otological kind of conditions, other one is his general history. It could be for general systemic problem, other general problem, maybe a neurological problem. Okay, so two important history we need to elicit. From two important history, we need to go for three important physical examinations. Okay, and these three physical examination comprises of, one is, it starts with a general physical examination. I re-emphasize again, general physical examination. Okay, it is common for us to skip sometimes general physical examination. When we are really focused on our otological problems. But see, there are conditions. I already told you about anemia, and also there's a condition atherosclerosis we should be careful about. And also, patient may have other systemic problems like orthostatic hypotension and all those things. For that to know, we have to do a systematic general physical examination. This need not be done by us. We can have an assistant or a nurse who, before she sends in, she fills a proforma. You can have a proforma who can, these things will be taken by somebody, and you're going to re-verify it. Okay. From general physical examination, you're going to move on to the otological examination. And all this has been already taught to you earlier by my previous speakers. I'm not going to talk much about otological examination. And neurological examination is very important. I'm going to stress again, neurological examination is very important, because this is not just otology. We are neuro-otologists. See, neuro comes before otology. That means we should be stressing more on neurological examination, because sometimes some of these acute vertigos, which we feel peripheral vertigos, may not be peripheral vertigos at all. They may be masquerading problems, neurological problems. Okay, maybe a stroke. We are presenting like a vertigo, masquerading. So we should diligently, we should examine the patient neurologically whenever we suspect that. Okay. From 3 physical examination, we move on to 4 cranial nerves. It doesn't mean that we don't have to check other cranial nerves. We have to check as and when necessary. But these 4 cranial nerves you should not miss. That is starting from oculomotor, trigeminal, the facial nerve, and vestibulocochlear nerve. Okay, for the obvious reasons. Okay, one is oculomotor. You're going to check nystagmus and other eye movements. Okay, that you need to examine that. Trigeminal nerve, specifically, you're going to look for corneal reflex, because that is one of the signs of an acoustic neuroma. Then you have to examine facial nerve properly, because acoustic neuroma or any other CP angle tumor which may be presenting as vertigo may also present with facial paresis or other facial symptoms. And of course, vestibulocochlear nerve, I don't have to re-emphasize about that. Okay, and coming with 4 cranial nerves, and we must do in all cases 5 bed test tests if patient general condition permits. It happens that some acute vertigos, the patient will have such a severe vertigo with nausea and vomiting. We may not be able to do some of the tests immediately, but at least at a later time we should be able to do it. Okay, so what bedside test we should be doing is, one is fistula test, which is very common. Other than with using our just finger over the tragus, we should all have a an instrument to check the fistula test. That is what we use is, I forgot the name, that speculum. I'm not getting that spare name now. Okay, that speculum. Okay, and next is the Dix-Hallpike test. Okay, you must do a Dix-Hallpike test in all these patients. And the third important test is the Romberg's test. Okay, Romberg test is something you must do without fail, which is going to give a lot of clue about patients' neurological condition as well as our peripheral vertigo also. And head impulse test, I need not re-emphasize about head impulse test. Now this has become one of the gold standard as far as acute vestibular neuronitis is concerned. And caloric test. Caloric test, is it a bedside test? Some friends may ask me. If you want to do, it can be a bed test, because see, what do we need for a caloric test? You need to cold water, you need warm water. See, every hospital, every clinic is going to have a refrigerator, and it is going to have a sterilizer. So both the things, cold water as well as warm water, are at your disposal whenever you want it, even in the wards also. Okay. So if you want to do it, really want to do it, just, you can check. If you want to get a check immediately, you can do it right away. Okay. That's why I always keep this caloric test as a bed test and not as a investigation. You can also do as an investigation. You can also do a caloric test along with the VNG and other tests that can be done. Okay, yeah, that is important. From that 5 bedside examination, we move on to the 6 eye examinations we must do without fail. Okay, 6 eye examinations. What are the 6 eye examinations? First, look for pallor, which comes in general physical examination itself, because a lot of this patient presenting with vertigo may be anemia. Because of anemia, they will have those weakness and unsteadiness, weakness kind of symptoms that you need to rule out. And next eye examination, nystagmus, that every ENT surgeon, neuro-otologist is going to do it. Okay, I am not going to speak much about it. A lot of has been said about nystagmus already, discussed about nystagmus already. Okay, and the third eye examination you must do without fail is corneal reflex. One of the simplest tests you can do is a corneal reflex. Okay, and then the visual field, and the arcus senilis and the fundoscopy. Okay, the corneal this thing corneal reflex, which is mediated by trigeminal ophthalmic division of trigeminal nerve, as well as the abducens now, and you know that the importance of that, particularly in acoustic neuroma. So that you should be doing. And visual confrontation test a lot of these neurological conditions, and the stroke like conditions where the patient may have a impaired vision, or if not impaired vision, impaired visual fields. This is some test which you can do at at your OPD itself. That is visual confrontation test that you should do without fail. And look for all these patients, this arcus senilis sometimes, which may be missed or ignored. Okay, why? Because see, all these patients who have this marked arcus senilis is likely to have a severe atherosclerosis. These are the patients who are prone for cerebrovascular accidents and strokes like conditions. Okay, so this is one clue for those conditions. Okay, and again, if you can do a fundoscopic examination, that's an excellent thing to examine fundus in these patients. If you are unable, in some of these, particularly when you suspect neurological problems, get a fundoscopic examination done. Okay, and subtle symptoms like raised ICT and other things will be easily detected with fundus examination. So is atherosclerosis also. From this 6 eye examination, we'll move on to 7 essential investigations we may have to get done in these patients to arrive at a right diagnosis. Okay, so all our investigations start with one important investigation, that is audiological investigations. Okay, see, routinely we must get these audiological investigations done. See, many a times we can diagnose many of these cases with history alone, but you need to document. See, where is the importance of whatever comes when you want to treat is in the documentation. Okay, so you should have a proper documentation when you are trying to do some definitive treatment for the patient in the form of intratympanic gentamicin or even some surgery. Okay, so the basic test we should start with is a Puton audiometry, impedance audiometry, and tone decay test, which gives a very good this thing about whether lesion is a retrocochlear or cochlear lesion. Okay, if you suspect, then you can go for a ABR. Okay, otherwise nowadays ever since the MRI came, the ABR importance of the ABR is decreasing actually. Coming to the blood work, essential blood work we need to get it done is one is the hemoglobin, very important, ESR, and know the patient diabetic status. So ideal thing is to get in HbA1c instead of fasting blood sugar. This is the ideal thing. It will give a historical value of patients, so diabetic status and serum cholesterol to rule out atherosclerotic conditions, and of course thyroid state, this thing TSH, and also to rule out neurosyphilis, that is FDA ABS we should get it done, and also all these patients we should get done HIV also. Okay, and coming to the radiology concern, see, now we need to be very judgmental. We should choose a right investigation. Okay, we have an opportunity to get CT or MRI. We should think which is going to help patient maximum. Okay, so if it is within the if you suspect a lesion within the temporal bone, CT is best for temporal bone lesions. Okay, if you suspect lesion beyond the temporal bone in the CP angle, okay, or beyond, you're suspecting a neurological problem, the MRI was, but sometimes you may have to get done both. That is, we need to judge properly. We can't subject the patients to each and every investigation available. We need to tighter, depending on their problem. Okay, with that, move on to next video histomography. And during the last class, Dr. Kshitij, he beautifully explained all these investigations, and vestibular evoked myogenic potential, SWEM, ECOG, and rotational testing. Each of these tests, objective tests, have their own indications. You should know when to do those tests. Coming to the objective vestibular test, and this is a diagram which will explain you which investigation to do in when you suspect particular lesion in a specific region of the vestibule and cochlea. Okay, rotational test when you suspect problem in the semicircular canals. Okay, and VNG, that is when you suspect problem in lateral semicircular canal. Okay, and ABR when you suspect problem in vestibulocochlear nerve, and electrocochleography for the cochlea. And then we have this VEMP. Okay, that is ocular vamp. That is when to assess the atrial and cervical vamp. That is for the sacule. And then we have this video head impulse test, which is both for posterior and superior semicircular canals. Okay, so you can judge yourself which is the ideal investigation to be done. Coming to the diseases, from 7 essential investigations, we'll move on to 8 diseases we need to learn when we are treating peripheral vertigo. So we have to be proficient with only these 8 conditions. Okay, starting with Meniere's. In my practice, Meniere's is the commonest etiology for vertigo, followed by a close contender, that is BPPV. Okay, then we have this vestibular neuritis, quite a lot of cases coming, and once in a while we find these other cases, perilymphatic fistula, acoustic neuroma, labyrinthitis, and vascular lobe syndrome. And I've seen just 2 cases of superior semicircular canal Dyson syndrome also. Okay, so we need to remember how these 8 diseases present, and if we can diagnose these problems, treat these problems, we can, most of the problems we can diagnose. Okay, so with that we will move on to the specific problems. So now the quiz starts now for you people. Okay, so I am going to present and you are going to answer. Okay, so now let us start with history. I told you one history you need to remember, that is one definition of vertigo, that is rotary vertigo. Okay, patient presenting with history of subjective or objective sensation of rotary vertigo. That is important for us for peripheral vertigo. But other patients, some other patients may also present with a dizziness, like vague condition, or an unsteadiness or lightheadedness. Okay, but we are interested more about a rotary vertigo. Okay, so we will start with rotary vertigo. So patient presents with a rotary vertigo, so we can evaluate depending on whether acute or chronic. Okay, we'll start with acute first. So patient present with rotary vertigo with a acute vertigo. When a patient present with acute vertigo, find out whether it is continuous or intermittent. Okay, it can be either continuous or intermittent. Okay, so rotary vertigo, patient presenting with rotary vertigo, acute, which is acute in nature, and it is continuous. What should we do next? Next, find out, is there any other otological problem or no other otological problem. Okay, so if no otological problem, acute vertigo, rotary vertigo, continuous vertigo, there are no other otological problems. Okay, so what you should be doing first is head impulse test. Okay, patient just has severe acute severe vertigo and presents to the emergency. So do an head impulse test, and you find that there is a abnormal head impulse test, there is no vertical skew, and there is a unidirectional nystagmus. Okay, I hope you arrived at the diagnosis. That is, patient presents with acute rotary vertigo, which is continuous in nature, with lot of nausea and vomiting, and an examination, he has no other otological symptoms. He has a abnormal head impulse test, but there is no vertical skew, and an examination of the nystagmus, he has a unidirectional nystagmus. Okay, and you do caloric test, and he also has a canal paresis. Okay, he has a canal paresis. So I hope you arrived at the diagnosis. Okay, this could be, I hope you know the diagnosis. If required, you can also get, if you have facility, you can also get a test done, WEM test done, which will help you to differentiate. I will come to that later. Okay, that is, I hope you are at the diagnosis, that is acute vestibular neuronitis. Okay, see, acute vestibular neuronitis, sometimes it may be very difficult to see any radiological signs or any other signs other than this abnormal head impulse test. But there are some reports that MRI can find out if there is edema of the this thing vestibular now. Okay, and sometimes MRI is also important to differentiate it from ICA like ICA infarction like syndrome or other brainstem lesions, brainstem infarction kind of lesions. Very important. That is, we remember. Okay, I will go back. I hope you have guessed the diagnosis. See, the VAMP becomes very important because now we know that acute vestibular neuronitis can be superior or inferior. Okay, to differentiate like whether it is superior, inferior, inferior is very less common. They say it can occur up to about 15% of the patients, and most of the times it is superior vestibular neuronitis. Probably once I complete the picture, other panelists will be able to highlight you about this, uh, the WEMP and other tests, and we can discuss later. Okay. So now with this, again, I will present to you. Patient presents with acute rotary vertigo, continuous in nature. Okay. But at an head impulse test, there is normal head impulse test. There is no vertical skew, and there is plus or minus nystagmus. So what do you suspect? Acute vertigo, maybe having nausea vomiting. He has patient has nausea and vomiting, and rotary vertigo, and presents to emergency, and an head impulse test is there is normal head impulse test, okay, and no vertical skew. So these conditions suspect migraine, basilar migraine. Okay, basilar migraine is very notorious condition. Sometimes it can mimic a lot of other problems, but we need to go back to the international classification of headache disorders and keep this criteria. I'm going to cover a little bit of theory as well as basilar migraine concern, because a lot has been discussed earlier. But this is one condition can evade our diagnosis, but we should remember what are the criteria to identify it. Okay, so to say it is the basilar migraine, there should be at least 2 attacks follow the fulfilling following criteria. This is from International Classification of Headache Disorders, second edition. Okay, at least 2 attacks fulfilling criteria BND, that is an aura consisting of at least 2 of the following fully reversible symptoms. Remember, fully reversible symptoms, but no motor weakness. Okay, no motor weakness. Patient may have dysarthria, vertigo, tinnitus, hyperacusia, that is sensitive to loud sounds, and there may be diplopia and visual symptoms simultaneously in temporal and nasal field of both eyes. That's why I said examination of visual field, why it is important, visual confrontation test. Okay, and there may be an ataxia and decreased level of consciousness simultaneously. Bilateral paresthesia may be there. Any 2 symptoms. So sometimes it may be just vertigo and tinnitus, or tinnitus and hyperacusia. So sometimes we easily confuse these patients for a Meniere's disease also. Okay. So in addition, patient may also have at least one of the following. Okay, at least one aura symptom develops gradually over more than 5 minutes, and are different symptoms occur in succession over 5 minutes. Okay, and each symptom lasts more than 5 minutes and less than 60 minutes. Okay, see, this slide is little blurred. I don't know why the resolution has gone down. Please forgive me for that. Okay, and there may be headache fulfilling criteria B and D for migraine without aura, begins during the aura or follows aura within 60 minutes. Okay, remember this, not attributed to any other disorder, should not be other disorder, should not be there. Okay, and coming to the clinical characteristic of basilar migraine type migraine, you need to remember always 2 or more basilar type aura symptoms will be there. Always visual aura characterized by positive or negative features will be there. Sometimes with sensory aura characterized by positive or negative features. Sometimes with either aphasia or dysarthria, or aura symptoms almost always develop gradually or to occur in section over 5 minutes. Or aura duration 5 to, it may go up to 2 hours. Okay, headache with migraine features begins after onset of aura, and age of onset is usually less than 50 years. Sometimes we see it in young female patients. Okay, almost always coexisting attacks of migraine with typical aura may be there. Okay, so remember this criteria, that will help you a lot. There's an interesting paper I read recently. If somebody is interested, I will send it at the end of the presentation. Okay, yeah, now we'll move on to the next condition from migraine, basilar migraine. Okay, again, patient has presented with acute rotary continuous vertigo. Okay, acute rotary continuous vertigo. Again, you have done a head impulse test. We are okay. Again, we have a normal head impulse test, but here in this patient has a vertical skew. Remember this, vertical skew, and has a bidirectional nystagmus. So what you should be suspecting? I hope you have answers with you. Okay, in these patients, when there is a vertical skew, you must do a detailed neurological examination. If required, get a CT and MRI done. So these patients may also give history of headache along with this these acute continuous vertigo. Okay, so you suspect you suspect some CNS problems, specifically cerebellar problems. And one of the commonest which can present to us is ICA infarction and stroke like this condition. Okay. So we should be very careful about these patients. Okay. When head impulse test is normal and there is a vertical skew, immediately the alarm should bell in our minds. Okay. I hope that is clear to you. Okay. And patient who have predominantly headache, same thing, acute continuous vertigo, normal this thing, normal head impulse test, uh, but there is a vertical skews there. There may be bidirectional nystagmus. And these patients, again, if they present predominantly with vertigo, again, what you suspect migraine. Okay. So you need to evaluate further patients, and some of these patients you may have to get an MRI done to rule out CNS problem. See, I had read long back this thing, I think not read. This is I attended one of the lectures by Professor Michael Strupp, who tours India several times a year. That is bucket test. Okay, mainly for this migraine. I haven't done this test to anybody, to be honest. So I want our panelists to highlight about this. Perhaps Dr. Srinivas and Pawan will be able to highlight more about this test for these patients. Okay, and again, patient presenting with acute rotary vertigo, which is continuous, but now these patients have other otological symptoms. Earlier, all those three streams didn't have any other otological symptoms. These patients have otological symptoms. Okay, so one of these patients is presenting with characteristic tetrad of symptoms and periodicity. Okay, acute vertigo, rotary vertigo, okay, continuous vertigo, but he has symptoms, tetrad of symptoms and periodicity. Again, caloric shows that there is a canal paresis, and you get an audiometry done. Patient has this characteristic low frequency hearing loss, which improves upon glyceraldehyde dehydration test. I hope you have arrived at the diagnosis. I think if you are messaging Dr. Pawan, you will be receiving a lot of WhatsApp messages, which he will not be able to keep track of them. Okay, so if you want, you can get a WEMP also done, and I hope you guess the diagnosis. That is Meniere's disease. And WEMP, what you find is reduced amplitude and affected side and increased amplitude in ocular WEMP, and reduced amplitude and affected side in cervical WEMP. That is important. See, what is the role of investigations if I could find out the diagnosis with the history itself, with this basic clinical examination? See, the role of investigation arises when you want to document the case. Okay, I want to give a intratympanic injection for this patient. I really don't want to give if I have a proper documentation and to prove my diagnosis. Okay, that is very important nowadays. Our patients have become so sensitive, and they're very aware, and all Google scholars now. So you should be very careful about this. Okay, yeah. Let me have some water. Then next is continuous vertigo. So, okay, other otological signs and symptoms are there, and patients presents with history of trauma, continuous acute rotary continuous vertigo, with other otological symptoms, with history of trauma, barotrauma, or penetrating injury, or history of heavy straining is there. Okay, and patient may have a deafness also, but on examination you find that fistula test is positive. Okay, you also do this Siegel test, and you find that it is positive. And if you get it done, a VANG with fistula test also, it finds it positive. I hope you have arrived at a diagnosis. If required, get a HRCT temporal bone also. Sometimes it can prove the diagnosis HRCT temporal bone, but it is not sensitive and specific many a times. I hope you have arrived at the diagnosis. That is, you do a surgical exploration, then you will be able to get it. That is perilimb fistula. With history alone, you will be reaching the diagnosis, but you need to document. So you have to get a audiometry and the HRCT temporal bone done. Okay, that is important. Again, another set of patients who present with acute rotary vertigo, which is continuous in nature, and they have other otological symptoms, signs and symptoms. That is, they also present with history of viral infections, maybe and ear discharge, earache, and they may have fever. Okay, these are the patients you should be careful. And an examination, if you find that they have a lot of irritative nystagmus, and there may not be decreased hearing. Okay, and calorics may not be this thing. Okay, most of the times they're normal. Head impulse test is normal. Dix Alpex is normal. Okay, I hope this should ring the bell. That is, patient has a history of ear discharge, ear infections, okay, and earache, fever, irritative nystagmus, okay, no decreased hearing, calorics, HIT, head impulse test, Dix-Alpec test, all normal. And here you do a HRCT, you find that there is a suppurative labyrinthitis and maybe meningitis also, okay, maybe meningitis also. So in these patients, you have to do a CSF study and confirm the suppurative labyrinthitis and meningitis, okay, that is important. Okay, next, acute vertigo, but it is not continuous in nature, okay, acute vertigo, not continuous, it is intermittent in nature. Again, in these patients, you have to find out, are there any other otological signs and symptoms or no other otological signs and symptoms? Okay, patient presenting with other otological symptoms, like earlier, again, they have tetrad of symptoms and periodicity with a canal paresis, okay, and an audiometry, low frequency hearing loss, and the glycerol dehydration test, which improves this hearing loss. So in WEMP, again, you are confirming what's the diagnosis. Okay, you must have already arrived the diagnosis. This is Meniere's, okay, intermittent periodicity tetrad of symptoms. Okay, again, patients presenting with other otological symptoms, okay, acute vertigo, which is intermittent nature, with other otological symptoms. Again, patient has history of trauma, barotrauma, penetrating injury, or straining. I'm sure you have come at the diagnosis, and fistula test is positive, even that is which is confirmed by a VNG fistula test and a CT CT temporal bone, which you confirm on a surgical exploration. Okay, that is perilymphatic fistula. Okay, again, which can have either continuous or intermittent vertigo. So some of these patients, with acute intermittent vertigo, presenting to you with other otological symptoms, may have a Tullio phenomena, which is aggravated by cough, sneezing, and straining. Okay, and these patients may have hearing loss and autophonia also. I hope you have come to the arrived at the diagnosis. I will come back again. Okay, that is patient presenting with acute intermittent vertigo. Okay, patient also gives history of Tullio phenomena, which is aggravated by cough, sneezing, and straining. Okay, there is hearing loss and autophony, and which is aggravated by Valsalva, and an audiometry, you find that patient have as a severe conductive hearing loss, specifically at high frequencies, and an HRCT temporal bone confirms your diagnosis, that is superior semicircular canal Dyson syndrome. Okay, this is how we arrive at the diagnosis for this. Again, you can get an MVM also done if you want, which shows on cervical vamp a reduced threshold, okay, and an ocular vamp, increase amplitude and reduce threshold on ocular vamp if you want to get it done. Okay, coming to the again acute intermittent vertigo, where patient doesn't have any other otological signs and symptoms. Okay, they don't have any other otological symptoms, but the Dix-Hallpike test is positive. This should ring the bell in your mind. Dix-Hallpike test is positive. The diagnosis is BPPV. Okay, diagnosis BPPV. See, we have already discussed a lot about how to differentiate between horizontal and posterior semicircular BPPV. So I will not go much detail into it. Okay. Yeah. Again, now from acute condition, we'll go to chronic conditions now. Chronic vertigos. Okay. Chronic vertigos, when they come to us, again, you go to the history whether patient has other otological signs and symptoms or no other otological signs and symptoms. Okay. With other otological signs and symptoms, find out again the characteristic treated of symptoms and periodicity, caloric canal paresis, and audiometry, low frequency hearing loss. Again, glycerol rate test shows that there is some improvement in hearing loss, and WEMP confirms the diagnosis. I hope you already have the diagnosis, that is Meniere's syndrome. Okay. Now with that, chronic vertigo. okay, with continuous vertigo with other otological signs and symptoms. Fistula test is positive, VNG fistula test and HRCT temporal bone positive, and surgical explosion you confirm, and that is perilymphatic fistula. Okay, again easy. So again, some of these patient presenting to you, okay, chronic continuous vertigo with other otological symptoms. There's a other test, it is not periodic vertigo. So where you find a corneal reflex negative, there may be decreased hearing and facial paralysis plus or minus. This should ring the bell. That is, the corneal reflex is negative. There is history of hardness of hearing or hard of hearing, and facial paralysis plus or minus, and uh, get a Puton audiometry and acoustic reflex done, and your tone decay test, it shows that there is a retrocochlear pathology. If you are in habit of doing a ABR, what it shows ABR is, it shows a latency, a V5 wave or 5 latency, a delay it shows. Okay, so that you find it, and which is confirmed on a MRI. It's nothing but acoustic neuroma. Okay, so the clinical examination itself, it should lead you to the diagnosis, which you again confirm with an MRI. But sometimes when small lesions are there, these typical signs or symptoms may not be there. So then it becomes, your MRI becomes gold standard in arriving at diagnosis in some of these cases, that we should remember. Okay, again, chronic continuous vertigo with no other otological signs and symptoms. Okay, where the Dix-Hallpike test is positive, so you arrive at the diagnosis of BPPV. Okay, that is how we okay. And some of this patient presenting with periodic vertigo, positional, and some of this patient may have motion intolerance. Remember, motion intolerance, and Dix-Hallpike test is negative. Okay, and HRCT temporal bone, you don't find anything. Okay, and on MRI angiography, you find that there is some abnormal a vessel kind of this thing pressing on the, or it is crossing over the vestibulocochlear nerve, that is vascular loop syndrome. We'll just recap this. Okay, we'll go. Okay, again, periodic vertigo, position, it could be positional vertigo also. Patient may also have a motion intolerance where Dix-Hallpike test is negative. The HRCT temporal bone may not show anything, so which is confirmed on an MRI, specifically MRI angiography, that is vascular loop syndrome. That you need to remember. So with this, from rotary vertigo, we'll move on to other vertigos. Okay, that is patient presenting with dizziness. See, dizziness, a vague dizziness kind of symptom that can be there in vestibular disorders as well as the cerebellar or visual or hematologic acid anemia or gastrointestinal conditions also. So once you rule out, once you have your definition right, you rule out the vestibular vertigos, then you can look at these conditions and investigate specifically. Okay, that is about dizziness. From there, the unsteadiness, patient says he can't walk properly, he can't stand properly, and also with Romberg test or Fukuda test or walking test, gait test and all, you can confirm that patient indeed is unsteady. So that can happen, anywhere in the CNS, in the cerebrum, cerebellum, pyramidal tract, posterior column, or peripheral nervous system. Anywhere the problem can be. Okay, and some patients may present with a lightheadedness. Okay, usually vascular, it can be a transient ischemic attack or atherosclerosis, a vascular accident. So many things can, mainly vascular things can give rise to this lightheadedness that we need to remember. Okay, yeah. Okay, friends, with this, this is a simple presentation I wanted to present about our Kent algorithm. This is my hospital, Kent Hospital at Chitradurga. I'm going to, I think, I'm not sure what is happening here. Let me unmute Dr. Pavanji. I think he is, I think probably he's muted. I'm going to unmute him. Okay. Whom else I'm supposed to mute?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, whom else I'm supposed to unmute? One is Dr.
You
Srinivas.
mute Dr. Rajiv Kapila.
Okay, Rajiv is here. Dr. Rajiv Kapila, 1 minute. Kapila, his name is not showing up. Okay, he's there. Yeah, I'm going to unmute him.
Dr. Srinivas.
Yeah, I've unmuted Rajiv Kapila. And Srinivas, yeah, he's here. Okay.
And Shashank Nath Singh.
Yeah, Dr. Shashank Nath Singh. Hai na?
And then Dr. Amit Kesri.
Oh, Amit, I didn't see him. Is here? Okay.
Amit Kesri is here. He was putting in a lot of comments over there. He was responding.
Okay. But I'm not going to answer any questions. Okay.
Okay. I'll ask you. Don't worry. We do have encyclopedia of Puerto Rico with us.
Yeah.
Then you can unmute Kshitiz also. Kshitiz.
Yeah. I'm going to. Okay. I'm going to unmute Amit. Yeah, I've unmuted and Kshitij. Yeah.
And Amit Goel.
Hello. Good evening, sir.
Yeah. Good evening, Amit. I didn't see you in the beginning. Yeah. Okay.
So, sir, thank you so much. It was certainly a nice presentation.
I don't know whether the flow was there or not, because this is not meant for Zoom.
It was a bit fast.
Very nice presentation, sir.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Kapila here.
Okay, thank you very much.
So now
Dr. Amit Goel is under what name is there?
Sir, I think we can go ahead with the discussion part.
Yeah. Okay, I can't see Dr. Amit Goel. He's under what name? I don't know. Yeah.
Amit Goel. Goyal. It's okay. You keep on doing that. I'm firing questions to our August.
Yeah. Okay.
Panelists.
I see there are more than 99 chat.
Guys, please avoid doing these pleasantries on the chat box. It disturbs the discussion. Okay. So after such a wonderful presentation, we do have a lot of questions and queries, and there have been a lot of people who have been giving answers immediately on the my WhatsApp and on the chat box also to your questions. Like Sharad Mishra was there, who was responding very well. All questions are right. Farah Sanood was there. Dr. Devi Durga Das, she was very active. Abhishek was there. Dr. Kumara Raja was he gave one of the particular answer to a difficult question. Then Pritam Pathak was there. Okay. Yojna ma'am, Dr. Yojna Sharma from Karamsad, Gujarat, she responded each and every question with a perfect answer.
Perfect. So nice.
We had a lot of things. Amber was there. Priyanka Talati was there, who was responding well. And Dr. Prakash Moonka, of course, he is always there to help us out. And his questions are so pertinent and responses are so good. So we can start with Prakash sir's question itself.
Yeah.
Dr. Srinivas, for you.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Prakash Moonka sir asked, we do a cold and hot calorie test. But we know the cold calorie test is more specific as compared to the hot one.
Yeah.
Can we do cold only? Why to put in a hot?
In fact, I do cold only.
Okay. Any preservations in this regard? Why have you started doing that?
Basically, in fact, what I do is I do ice cold caloric. In fact, I do that on myself also. Yesterday, I have uploaded one video where I have undergone a ice cold caloric on myself. And it is not that uncomfortable or whatever, and you get the result very fast. The stimulation is quite strong. And you just need 2 ml of water. 2 ml of ice cold water from the fridge, and you get the response. There is no need for an elaborate setup. Take 2 ml of water in a syringe, which is kept in the freezer. Okay, and just take it out and then put and that freezer is there everywhere. It is there in every ward, near every OPD, close by. It will be there. All that we need to tell is, okay, keep one 10 ml water for injection thing there. Bring it and put it. Just 2 ml. Keep it for 10 seconds in the external artery canal. What I do is, I'll make the patient turn to one side, one lateral position, put 2 ml into the external artery canal, wait for just 10 seconds, and then turn back while keeping a tissue paper. The 2 ml will just drain out, and within 15 seconds, you'll start seeing the nystagmus. I have undergone, so I know how the feeling is also there. and that is all we know. Because nowadays what we are doing caloric test is to make sure that that side labyrinth is responsive, that side labyrinth is alive. That is all. All other things for which the caloric used to be done, now we have found other replacements. Okay, there are a lot of other replacements that have come. So I do that. But then there are a lot of other people who do a bithermal caloric test, and they get much more information based on that. But personally, I do only ice cold.
Great, sir. So Priyanka Talati again asking about it. If patient has got a perforation, what alternate test do you do?
See, as of now, we don't have air caloric. So if at all you have an option for a air caloric with that facility is there, then you can always go for a air caloric. Otherwise, we'll have to do with the other alternatives to assess the labyrinthine responsiveness.
Response.
In fact, the other day, Dr. Kshitij was making a beautiful case presentation, which was like caloric was absent, whereas the head impulse test was normal in his particular case, that is Meniere's disease. And we came up with a beautiful explanation where probably in Meniere's disease, it's only the type 2 hair cells which are lost. Type 1 hair cells which are responsible for the phasic input are still intact. So therefore, these people do respond very well to head impulse test, whereas the tonic input, which comes because of caloric response, is absent. So that way, that is going to be useful. I think Dr. Kshitij is there in the panel, so he can add.
Dr. Yojna, ma'am, is talking about Dundas Grant tube. Have you ever used that?
Which one, sir? Oh, Dundas Grant is a huge. My understanding is it's a huge setup. Okay, and then there are multiple copper wires going, and then you have to put those things. So I have not seen other than the pictures.
That, I think wasn't.
Yeah,
okay.
So, sir, before we proceed, I just wanted to make one. I didn't start. I got the question before I could speak on it.
Yeah.
Prahlad sir's lecture, in one phrase, if I have to describe today's Prahlad sir's lecture, it is the textbook on vertigo in 1 hour.
Yes.
It should be renamed as textbook of vertigo in 1 hour.
Thank you very much.
That's why I'm requesting all the speakers to write down a chapter for our NES Vertigo update that will be sent to each and every participants over there.
Yes, sir.
So that's what I'm gonna edit that update with the help of Prahlad sir and our association. Amit Kesri is there. The next question.
Can I interrupt? Before we proceed with the next question, Dr. Kshitij does bithermal caloric, and he has his own very strong reasons to do that. We should take his opinion.
Okay. So can I? Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Srinivas and Dr. Pavan. So there's a recent textbook chapter, caloric irrigation test, which is by Dr. Shepherd, N.T. Shepherd. And if you search it up, it shows about caloric irrigation methods. Now, of course, biothermal irrigation is foolproof in a way that you are less likely to get false positives in that. But there's a monothermal warm caloric screening MWCT methodology also. And in that, you can do a monothermal caloric, just that you would have to change the normative value for a asymmetry. And I believe the value, if the asymmetry between a monothermal caloric test is 10% or lesser, then you don't need to go for a bithermal. Then you don't need to sort of do the other stimulation. But this is based on the recent chapters. And the textbook, the chapter is by Dr. N.T. Shepherd, Shepard. So I would ask the audience to sort of Google that up. It's an Elsewhere publication. See that, and it tells you when to not do a bithermal. Dr. Shepherd is from the Department of Otolaryngology from Mayo Clinic. So it's pretty definitive about when you can shift to a monothermal and when you need to do a bithermal.
Dr. Kshitij, we are going to use this technique in 5 minutes lecture in one of the webinars. I think we can club 5 minutes lecture on that particular technique you are describing by Shepherd. So I can incorporate that later on. So the next question I would like to subject to Dr. Shashank Nath Singh. There has always been talks about changes in the cervical vertebra induced and giving rise to vertigo. Dr. Shashank Nath Singh, what do you have to say about that? Oh, Shashank is not unmuted, sir. Can we
Oh,
unmute him?
I'll do it again. Okay.
Meanwhile,
Yeah.
I can subject the one question to Dr. Rajiv Kapila.
Yeah, he is unmuted. Dr. Shashank Singh, Nath
Yeah,
Singh is
Shashank,
unmuted. Yeah.
Dr. Shashank, are you there?
Yes, I am there, Dr.
Yeah,
Pawar.
Yeah.
Good
Can you
evening,
please
everyone.
tell us the correlation between cervical spine changes and vertigo?
Yes, Dr. Pawan. Before going to the question, first of all, I like to say that, sir, an amazing presentation. And it was like a theory class and a refresher for each and every one of you and every one of us. And coming to the question, so it is a myth. Actually, I would rather call it a myth. The cause for vertigo in patients who have cervical spondylosis is not rather cervical spondylosis, but it is more of a vertebrobasilar insufficiency, which causes a central kind of a vertigo rather than a peripheral vertigo. Patients who have cervical spondylosis, it has been seen in studies that these patients are normally elderly and they have arteriosclerotic changes in their vertebrobasilar arteries, which is more prominent with head movement.
Yeah.
Doppler studies have shown that a 60-degree head movement causes decreased flow in the vertebrobasilar artery, and which leads to the vertigo. So it is the insufficiency of the vertebrobasilar artery rather than the spondylosis itself causing vertigo. And there are fights which cause compression over the arteries, which leads to this vertigo.
Okay, clear enough, I think. Dr. Rajiv Kapila.
Yeah, hi Pawan boss. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
there was a question by one of my resident. He
Okay.
messaged on WhatsApp that, sir, we could not get this this concept of lightheadedness ever. Like, what is that lightheadedness patient sometimes complains of, and how do you correlate it with certain diseases?
Boss, we quite often see with complaints like this lightheadedness or a vague feeling in the headache, or the patient says sometimes he has a tendency to fall or a body feeling heavy. So most of the time, these type of symptoms are, anxiety related, or when the patient is very anxious, he tries to hyperventilate, and that hyperventilation generally causes lightheadedness. So the patient needs to be consulted properly and about this. But yes, lightheadedness sometimes can also be caused by like postural hypotension. If patient suddenly stands up, or he may feel, or in some due to some drug addictions, like common drug addictions like alcoholics,
Yeah.
cigarette smoking,
Yeah.
and also, so there may be some underlying uh, some medicines like anti-allergics. So these
Okay.
may cause lightheadedness.
Okay, thank you. So we have questions by Abhik Siddhar and Dr. Devi Durgadas about the role of vitamin D and vitamin B12 in vertigo evolution. Dr. Srinivas, do they
Yes, sir.
play a role there somewhere in vertigo?
Yeah, yeah. And
Vitamin
one
D
more,
and B12.
one more vitamin we should remember is we should never forget thiamine. Even thiamine has been associated with balance disorders, even vertigo
Yes.
and sometimes ataxia.
Yeah.
Yes. And the rule that we should follow is if somebody is deficient to one water soluble vitamin, you can consider that he is deficient in all water soluble vitamins. If somebody has one deficiency of one fat soluble vitamin, you can probably consider that he has a deficiency of all fat soluble vitamins. So this is something that I was told by my pharmacology professor when I was in India.
So should we ask for some biochemical test for them?
Actually, there is a cost associated. So sometimes giving an injection is much cheaper than getting a test done. So it again depends on how the patient is, how affordable the patient is, and all those things. Sometimes it is very tempting to just give the vitamin, especially the B complex vitamin, water soluble vitamins, because if at all there is an excess, it will just wash out in the urine. So and then see the response is one way of attempting. The other way, for the more academically oriented people and all, then definitely it makes sense to
Okay.
test at least one. Okay,
I think
and then
fair
proceed.
enough. You have given the answer to that particular question. Dr. Pranal sir showed one bucket test. Can you remember that?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that.
It was like, I just know about, it was like to determine the monocular and the binocular visual perception, like visual verticals as such. Dr. I think Srinivas would enlighten it more somehow. Bucket test.
Yeah, see, actually, bucket test is very, very elegant and very simple. So you can, and anybody can make it. The principle, you just need one bucket. You don't need even instructions, because everybody knows how you just need one suspended pendulum from the outside, and inside one line we can draw. And then, of course, on the net also there are tests. There are published papers as to how to make that bucket at home. It will hardly, by my estimate, I have not done it. By my estimate, it should be done in a very short time at home. We should be able to do it. And definitely, there is a very nice concordance between the subjective visual vertical, especially if it is done monocularly with one eye open, one eye closed.
Yes.
And then the ocular torsion that you can only see with a fundus on fundoscopy or a fundus camera. So there is a very nice concordance. So you can actually.
Do you do it in your regular practice?
Yeah, in my practice, I have both in my practice, I don't use a bucket. We actually have a projected head impulse test similar to what Dr. Kshitij showed in the previous lecture.
Yeah,
and in addition to that,
innovation is, I think, sufficient enough to do all those things all together.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So in addition to that, what I do is I have a fundus camera also. So every patient undergoes a subjective visual vertical also, and we do test simultaneously on the fundus camera. I take a fundus picture to correlate whether there is the tilt that is seen of the globe inside the fundus tilt and the subjective visual vertical, whether they are matching or not. So we keep checking.
I think I do have a question for Dr. Rajiv Kapila. Sudiptran Sen has asked, is ECOG is always essential to diagnose Meniere's disease? Is it always diagnostic? Sometimes it comes normal in Meniere's disease.
You know, boss, generally ECOG has a very high sensitivity in diagnosis of Meniere's disease. So ECOG, what ECOG does is ECOG measures the membrane pressure, that is a submitting potential of the basilar membrane, and can compare it with that action potential of the nerve. And if the difference is more, it almost confirms that the disease is Meniere's disease. But yes, there can be some times where it may not be diagnostic, but most of the times it's a very sensitive test for Meniere's disease. But we can diagnose Meniere's disease on history and clinical on history.
Yeah, I think we go with the guidelines.
So, I actually have never understood the concept behind the doing ECOG in Meniere's disease. So I would like if somebody can highlight this point. So yes, it is a diagnostic test, but when do we use the ECOG in Meniere's disease?
Sir, if I can add on that. So
yeah, certainly. I wanted to ask you this question.
Yeah, so the point is that ECOG is a great tool, but it not only about the test, it also depends when you do it. So the chances of getting the test diagnostic is about 90% if I remember my stats correct, if it's done within the first 4 days of an attack. If you do it after the attack has passed after 5 days, then your sensitivity is about 60%, which you might toss a coin. I mean, honestly, 60% is not good enough at all. And so when you do it is important, number one. Number two, how you do it. Now, a lot of study have been done about the transtympanic ECOG. I believe what Kapila is saying is about the transtympanic, in which you put the electrode on the promontory. Is that correct, Dr. Kapila?
Yeah, Dr.
Yeah, but if you see most clinics, and we are one of them, we are not doing a transtympanic. We use a gold electrode, which is in the auditory canal, external canal, not deep inside, and that changes the sensitivity even more. So the idea is that if you suspect Meniere's and you also get a positive ECOG, then your confidence levels increase. But if your ECOG levels ECOG comes negative, that does not rule out active presence of eye drops. So again, your your fluctuating hearing loss and other parameters are still more important.
I think the
I
most
believe-
important part is history and your understanding about them. You can
Yeah.
correlate with the symptoms and all, and you can make a probable clinical diagnosis. I think that is most important part, and we have been always
But-
happy about taking a good history and good history.
Agreed, sir. But more and more interest has been going on ecology also because now people are doing more invasive treatments on Meniere's patients.
Yeah.
And so it's always a good idea to have something backed up in terms of a lab report. And I believe that's what's
drug infiltration and all those therapies, so they can also go ahead with it.
But we have a full webinar on Meniere's by Dr. Kesri.
Yeah,
soon,
so
right?
we'll be talking about that. Anybody can just elaborate CHAMP test, Dr. Srinivas?
Actually, I have not personally employed the CHAMP test. So though I keep coming across the CHAMP scores being told to me. So without a personal first-hand experience, I think I'm not the right person to be commenting about.
One who has asked is Dr. Kumara Raja PVS. He is certainly a knowledgeable and concerned
I
man.
think we can unmute him and take his views.
Dr. Kshitiz, would you like to take this question? CHAMP test.
So like Dr. Srinivas, I have no personal experience about this. So.
Okay. So anybody else in the panel?
No experience. Yeah.
CHAMP test. So neither me, I've not like seen this as most of the textbooks, the way we prepare our patients. I think. So
I think
another question. So I think, can you, sir, can you unmute Dr. Kumara Raja PVS?
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
let him speak about it.
Let him elaborate.
Kumara,
So
yeah.
next question of Dr. Devi Durga Das is about how to manage vascular loop syndromes, these paroxysmias and all.
Carbamazepine. First choice is carbamazepine.
Is it? That's what I start with.
Yeah.
And you keep on increasing doses, seeing the side effects and all. And if patient is not getting okay with that after maybe 3-6 months or maybe 1 or 2 years, the symptoms are coming back, then you add up something.
Then you go for surgery.
You don't add anything.
There are people who actually give. See, there are one is carbamazepine, another is oxcarbazepine, then
Lacosamide.
Yeah.
Lacosamide, amitriptyline, people also like.
And even gabapentin. Even gabapentin can.
Yes, gabapentin also works well.
Yeah.
If it is not going to be okay and the symptoms are literally disturbing day-to-day activity,
Yeah.
we have to do the endoscopic or maybe the open decompression. Okay.
Is Dr. Kumar Raja?
Yeah, he's unmuted. Unmuted.
Yeah, Dr. Kumar Raja, sir.
Sir,
Can you elaborate about CHAMP test?
Yeah, it's cochlear hair drops masking analysis procedure.
You're not
supposed to
audible.
be,
Can you come closer to your system and then?
Yeah, sir, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to be positive in Meniere's, but the negativity does not rule out Meniere's disease. It's supposed to be aiding in our diagnosis, but not a foolproof investigation. It's supposed to be helpful if we get a positive test. That's all.
Maybe we can say it is high specificity.
Yes.
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 Thank you so much, sir. So
thank you.
the next very pertinent question, as such, we do have a whole webinar for that. Vestibular considerations in cochlear implantation. Dr. Shashank, you do a lot of cochlear implants and you have been trained at Ahmedabad, BJMC, under Dr. Rajesh Vishwakarma, sir. I think you can elaborate, you can give a brief thing about significance of vestibular testing in cochlear implantation.
So there has been a lot of talk about this, and there had been a meta-analysis in 217, and I would like to quote that only. So rather than going for individual papers, there was a analysis in 217 by Dr. Imam from Canada, and he, from around 2,000 papers, he had chosen around 27 studies. And they came to the conclusion, these were mainly adult patients, and they came to the conclusion that clinical effect of CI on vascular function was found to be insignificant. But there was one point which I would really like to talk about here is there was a concept in one of the papers about only balancing ear. Like we have only hearing ear. There is only balancing ear. That means that patient is only one function was certainly causing. So it was recommended that clinically head impulse test should be a part of routine CI investigation. Though we have not incorporated this in our institute, but this was a very interesting recommendation.
So we took a study last year, which was presented at the APSCI Tokyo, in which we hit test on people with CI and compared the results on the implanted ear with the non-implanted ear. And we found that in some patients, the vestibular function, the V-hit results were better for the implanted ear than for the non-implanted ear. Of course, it was significant. It was substantial enough for you to change your clinical paradigms, but it definitely didn't have a very bad effect on the vestibular function.
Thank you so much, and I think we can discuss it more during our webinar on vestibular considerations in cochlear implantation. I think we do have a question from Dr. Gene Sargisian.
Pavanji, we lost your voice.
That a patient 20 years old has got, you get me that there now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, sir,
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Yeah, so 20 years patient, caloric bilateral reflexia, hit test bilateral positive, but sensory hearing loss, MR is not. What could be the diagnosis? Differential diagnosis rather. Dr. Srinivas?
Is it progressive? Hearing loss was progressive or was it?
No other accounts. He has written there. 20 years female, 20 years patient, bilateral areflexia on calorie, HIT positive, and bilateral SNHL.
But is it a recent onset SNL or is it long standing? This is one thing.
It's short duration, 10 days.
10
Bilateral.
days bilateral should be considering
Bilateral.
autoimmune inner ear disease.
Bilateral?
Autoimmune inner ear disease is one thing which can go that fast.
Yeah.
Yes. But MR is normal, or MR takes time in autoimmune disease to show something down there.
Yeah, and if it is isolated only inner ear related, then we may not get anything on MRI. So this patient, I think we'll have to seek the opinion of a rheumatologist, and very first they should be starting on steroids.
Okay. I think we have got a good answer by Narendra Kumar. CHAMP test requires advanced hardware to do like ipsilateral masking in ABR. Rather, CVAMP using both 500 tone burst and 1000 tone burst would be a better option than CHAMP. I think that is a better thing because CHAMP is not included in most of the batteries of investigation. I think most of the centers, they do not incorporate CHAMP in their armamentarium of investigations, I think. So that is good. So we do have about a lot of questions. I think, can we take that because it is already 9? I think we can respond them personally or maybe on the channel itself.
Yeah, I think we can.
On the NES website. So what you guys could do, you log in on NES website, that is nesofindia.com. If you go there, nesofindia.com, you find all these presentations there. We are uploading all the videos, presentations there.
Boss, you write the website in the chat box, okay?
Okay, I am writing down.
Yeah.
www.nesofindia.com. It has got all the links to the videos. It has got the membership list there. It will have a form of membership tomorrow. you can download the form, fill it up, take a snap, and send it to Dr. Amit Kesri, our secretary. And you can send the registration fee, the membership fee, by any mean, NEFT or check or something like that. You can contact to Dr. Amit Kesri. We have got a number there on the website. I think Dr. Amit can speak about that. Our secretary, Dr. Amit Kesri. Dr. K. Amit, you are there?
No, it doesn't look like he's there.
Okay.
I think he's
So this
he's
is
muted,
the
but
website. You will find
His
everything
mic is
on
muted.
this
He's there,
website.
but
his mic is muted.
Let me
And,
see. No,
And I
am
think
muted
you
in.
can also go ahead with on the YouTube channel of NES. That
Yes,
is
sir, I am there, sir. I am
Okay,
there.
okay.
I was-
Unmuted, yeah.
Dr. Amit, you can elaborate more about membership and our website and the channel.
So the membership is open. The form is there, and the membership fees is 2,500. And we have host of things lined up for the members, and we will also send a certificate and all that. And people can contact me on either my WhatsApp number or my email or the secretary NES email. And I welcome, but the final decision of EC will be there for the membership, but it will be a real-time basis. We will not hold it, the membership. And the other thing is that there was a lot of questions on Meniere's disease. We will try to cover everything in our Meniere's presentation.
In the coming presentations.
Yes.
Yeah,
And,
I am waiting for that, Amit.
Yeah.
I have lot of questions for you.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Amit. So I
okay.
think it was a nice presentation by Prahlad
Yeah,
sir.
very lucid presentation, and I enjoyed it, and it was like kind of
And Secretary, I think you can thank the panelists and all the audience who are taking part. And because of their zeal to learn, we are here.
Yes.
So
Still, we have 200 attendance at 9 p.m. after 1.5 hours in a Vertigo session, which is like that.
The maximum number.
Yeah, remarkable, and we have dedicated audience and the dedicated teachers too. Thank you very much from NES.
Even after we are having parallel presentations by eminent ENT surgeons right now, in the same time, we do have more than 300 people down there to learn the things from these masters, which are there in form of our auditor, Dr. Prahlad. He doesn't require any more, I think, introduction or something because he is the one who has given this platform. I think Dr. Shashank Nath Singh, Associate Professor at SMS Medical College, Jaipur. He was a colleague with Amit there, Amit Kesri
Yes. He was my senior. We had a lot of
I
good
think Dr. Rajiv Kapila.
Yeah, we had very.
And I think the one who deserves most of the appreciation in the field of vertigo is Dr. Srinivas.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Because if somebody is stuck up, there is a godfather, there is a guru who will respond to each and every question. That is Dr. Srinivas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Even I consult him when I am stuck somewhere, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Yeah. Thank you.
Sir, thank you, sir.
We are looking forward to meet you again on Tuesday.
On Tuesday.
Yes, the next webinar is on Tuesday. We have 2 webinars every week, Tuesday and Fridays, same time. The topics is there, and we will mail all the topics to everyone who sent us a mail.
Yeah. So next Tuesday is 16th. Okay.
Yes, sir. So Dr. Anita Bhandari ma'am would be there to enlighten us about pharmacotherapy.
Yes. This is very important, the pharmacotherapy.
Very important point, because we don't know how to use the drugs, the doses, which drug for which condition.
Today we know the diagnosis, how to make a diagnosis, and then
now
next
you are going to treat the patient with
Yes.
at first the medical management, then some procedures, then comes the differential diagnosis one by one. Then comes the surgery part, by one and only Dr. Satish Jain, who will be enlightening us with anatomical knowledge of skull base, and Dr. Sampath would be giving us brief account of surgeries for vertigo. So,
Yes,
folks,
Dr.
thank you
Sampath
so
did.
much. Good night.
Yes.
Good,
Yes.
Okay, good night
thank you,
all.
Shashank. Thank you, Ajit.
Thank you,
Good night.
friends.
Thank you.
sir.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you,
night, good
boss.
night, good night.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you, Prahlad sir.
Good night, good night.